It was not pretty by any means, but LSU gets the job done, taking down Wisconsin 35-31 in the ReliaQuest Bowl, propelling LSU to its second 10-win season in just 2 years under Brian Kelly. And it was due to late game heroics from Garrett Nussmeier in his first start as an LSU Tiger to secure the win.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, y'all? Happy New Year. Happy 2024. I hope everyone had a very happy and healthy and safe holiday season and a fun New Year's Eve. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can also check us out on YouTube as well. Just search Locked On LSU, hit that subscribe button, and you'll get notified as soon as new episodes of Locked On LSU drop. It was a fun start to 2024 for LSU as the Tigers take down the Wisconsin Badgers 35-31 in the ReliaQuest Bowl, and LSU notches 10 wins for the 2023 season. That's the second year in a row in just 2 years under Brian Kelly. Now, I want to get into that. I want to go into what that means big picture, but I want to start with the reason why LSU won that football game, and it is Garrett Nussmeier. We've talked a lot about Garrett Nussmeier over the last 3 years, but we don't know a lot about Garrett Nussmeier. We know more than maybe we did last week, but in Garrett Nussmeier's 3 years at LSU, we've seen such limited work. And I have to give Garrett Nussmeier a whole lot of credit when it would have been really easy for him to leave and to get a starting job elsewhere, because you saw some of the quarterbacking across the SEC this year. Garrett Nussmeier could have started at a whole lot of other SEC programs, even programs outside of the SEC, Clemson included. Garrett Nussmeier's services absolutely would have been appreciated at a program like that, but he decided to stick it out and decided to stay at LSU. Now, I don't discredit and don't blame any quarterback that wants to find a better opportunity for themselves, but I do admire Garrett Nussmeier's commitment to LSU. So we finally, after 3 years of him at LSU, got to see his first start in LSU uniform, his first start since 2020 when he was in high school. And look, it wasn't pretty. It wasn't always pretty. There were some ups and some downs. It was a slow start. It looked rough there in the first quarter and a half. But just as much as it didn't look very pretty, Garrett Nussmeier also did a whole lot of good. So if we're going to evaluate Garrett Nussmeier just based off of his first start, I'm really impressed. Now, it wasn't 100%. It wasn't an A+. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't flawless from the very beginning. But if you expected Garrett Nussmeier's very first start to be flawless from the very beginning, I think you're mistaken. I think those are unfair expectations. Because when we grade Garrett Nussmeier, when I evaluate Garrett Nussmeier, I have to look at a few different things, and I have to keep a few different things in mind. First of all, one thing that I just mentioned, it was his first start since 2020. It was his very first start in an LSU uniform. Now, I understand that he's been in the program for 3 years, that he's gotten a decent bit of work whenever he would come in after LSU was up at the half, or he would come in if Jayden Daniels was injured. But really, for the most part, that's not a lot of playing time. And I think it's a lot different when you're coming off cold off the bench versus when you're going into a game. You help develop a game plan, and you know that it's your job from the very beginning. So we needed to keep that in mind, his very first start. Even though he is a veteran at this point, now 3 years into the program, not a veteran starter. The second thing that you have to keep in mind, too, is don't forget, Mike Denbrock was not calling plays. What day was that? Monday? Was that Monday? I have no idea what day it is anymore. They've been living in the twilight zone the past couple of weeks. But that Mike Denbrock was not calling plays. Joe Sloan, quarterbacks coach, and Cortez Hankton, wide receivers coach, they were splitting play calling duties. So not only was Garrett Nussmeier new to this role, Not only do you have two first-time play callers, but you got both of those things going on. You've got a new quarterback and you've got new play callers, and the quarterback doesn't know the play callers well. The play callers don't know Garrett Nussmeier and the way that he ticks as much as they would know Jayden Daniels. Everyone's figuring things out for the first time. Okay, so great with a little bit of a curve, great with a little bit of a grain of salt, considering the newness, considering the change. But there was some good and some bad. So first, I want to start with the bad. Start with the bad, we'll get in with the good. For the bad from what we saw from Garrett Nussmeier, it was a rough start. And I was concerned within the first quarter, and I'll even extend that to the entirety of the first half, that LSU just looked lifeless on both sides of the football. It just seemed like they couldn't get anything moving offensively. They punted 5 times against Wisconsin. That's a season high. And 3 of those punts came on just the first 4 possessions. And when they went down 14-0 early in the game. And the deficit that they had in how much they struggled offensively, I truly did not think that team could have come back from 14-0. The defense, and we'll get into the defense couldn't stop Wisconsin, could not stop their quarterback, Tanner Mordecai. And the offense just couldn't really get in a groove. And Brian Kelly talked about how halftime in that game, that was the low point of the season. They went into the locker room down 21-14. LSU was at least able to find the end zone twice before the half. That was honestly kind of a shock to me, just based off of the momentum. But Wisconsin scores late in the second quarter. They go into halftime just kind of feeling deflated. So the start was rough. Part of that is on Garrett Nussmeier. Now, part of that, I think, is also due to all of the newness, but part of that was on Garrett Nussmeier. The other thing that I took away from that game, and it's not directly related to Garrett Nussmeier, but it's not directly related to Garrett Nussmeier. I think it was the glaring need to develop the run game, where Jayden Daniels covered up a whole lot of issues, or maybe supplemented the run game in a way that you probably didn't need to develop or rely on the running backs as much as you will with Garrett Nussmeier. Garrett Nussmeier simply does not have the legs or the speed, the elusiveness that Jayden Daniels has. Jayden Daniels was the best dual threat quarterback in all of college football. That's not Garrett Nussmeier's style. He's not immobile. He's not going to just sit back in the pocket and let let the edge rushers come at him all day long, but also he's not Jayden Daniels. He's not popping off 80-yard runs. So that was a big part of Monday's game to me, was moving forward into 2024 under the assumption that Garrett Nussmeier is your starting quarterback, and I think that he showed that he deserves to be your starting quarterback. You're going to need to develop the run game independent of the quarterback. That's what they really struggled with early. Now, they started to develop a little bit of a running momentum. Big runs from Caleb Jackson late in the game. We had a touchdown from Caleb Jackson late in the game. But you need to develop that run game. Whether Logan Diggs comes back or not, whether Josh Williams comes back next year or not, whatever your running back core looks like, you need to develop that run game. A couple of other things that, just looking at Garrett Nussmeier, him independently, he's got to work on the timing, and he has got to work on those balls that he throws close to the sideline. Because there were several balls that he threw that kind of looked like he was throwing it away, and genuinely, I don't think that was his intention. Now, there was one in particular where Garrett Nussmeier rolled out and he hit Brian Thomas right on the sideline, incomplete. And Brian Thomas stepped out. He caught it, but he stepped out of bounds, so it didn't count. That was on Brian Thomas. That's on Brian Thomas to be cognizant of where his feet are, to make sure that he stays within bounds. I thought it was a beautiful ball thrown from Garrett Nussmeier. Brian Thomas just needed to stay in bounds. Garrett Nussmeier needs to work on making something out of nothing, not throwing the ball away when that first read isn't there. Now, I would rather Garrett Nussmeier protect the ball and take care of the football instead of trying to force something that isn't there. But there were a lot of 50-50 balls that the receivers just simply couldn't make plays on because Garrett Nussmeier just didn't really give him a chance, because he threw it too close rather to the sideline, that they just couldn't make a play on it. So the timing, The accuracy, that needs some work. But man, I saw a really, really great foundation. And I was very impressed with Garrett Nussmeier. And I want to get into the good things, what I loved to see from Garrett Nussmeier. And we will get into that after just a few words from our sponsors. All right, I want to tell you about FanDuel. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, only 1 week left in the regular season, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's right, $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. And the app is so easy to use. There's so many different ways to bet, like live same game parlays. I bet so many games live, some of the college football playoff games on New Year's Day. It was a blast. Kept me locked in, especially when the Washington Texas game was going way past my bedtime. You can find bets in the new Explore tab. Love how FanDuel makes it so easy to find super fun bets and same game parlays. And you can also make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and so much more. So visit fanduel.com/locked on and make your first bet a layup. Again, that's fanduel.com/locked on. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, thanks again for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, we are part of the Locked On Network, your team every single day. And speaking of Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, rolling along here on Locked On LSU. LSU gets its 10th win of the season, taking down the Wisconsin Badgers 35-31 in the ReliaQuest Bowl. And it did feel like it was maybe some wrongs that were righted after that first game of the 2016 season. Everyone was picking LSU to win. LSU should have won. They lost to Wisconsin. I know it doesn't fix anything, but it did feel nice. It did feel nice to get a win. Breaking down Garrett Nussmeier. He didn't have a perfect first outing, but I was very impressed with what I saw from Garrett Nussmeier. Now, I'll be nitpicky and pick apart some things that he does need to improve upon. Now, you need to set your receivers up for more success than maybe we saw on Monday against Wisconsin. Give them the ability to make a play on it. There are a couple of throws there too that I said, look, you can't put your receivers in that position because that's just going to get them blown up. But those are all things that you can improve upon. Those are all things that I call them the live and you learns. You live, you play, you get more experience, and you learn from those things. Let's keep in mind, as long as it feels like Garrett Nussmeier has been in LSU, that was only his first start. He's going to pick up on those things. He's going to improve upon those things. But in the limited sample size that we have of Garrett Nussmeier in his 3 years at LSU, he looked like a better, more poised, more confident, and more patient quarterback against Wisconsin than we have seen in the entirety of his LSU career. What I really liked from Garrett Nussmeier is that I felt like this coaching staff didn't take away what makes him special, but they refined it. I go back to a conversation that Brian Kelly had with the media going into this season last year. He said, look, we got two quarterbacks, Jayden Daniels and Garrett Nussmeier. They both have individual things that they need to improve upon, but we don't want to take their strengths away. Jayden Daniels needs to work on the passing game, but we're not going to take his legs away while we develop him as a passer. We saw that come to fruition this past year. The conversation about Garrett Nussmeier was, look, he's a gunslinger. He wants to throw it deep. He wants to make those risky throws. We don't want to take that away from him. We just want to refine it. We want to make sure that they're not unnecessary risks. We want to make sure that he's not just slinging it all around the yard just for S's and G's. No, we want to make sure that Garrett Nussmeier pairs that arm with good judgment and good decision making. And I think I saw that. I think I saw a more confident Garrett Nussmeier than we have seen throughout the entirety of his LSU career. He played with such poise. And I think that the best indication of that, the best evidence of that, is the fact that LSU was down 2 scores on 2 different occasions in that game. That LSU went down 14-0 and they scratched and clawed their way back, was able to tie the game before the half. And then, of course, Wisconsin scored before the half to make it 21-14 going into the half. But when it felt like this LSU offense was down and out, when it felt like, at least to me watching at home, man, this is brutal. I don't know how they're going to come back from that. Garrett Nussmeier never seemed to panic. He just continued to get the job done. And I think the best evidence of that, not just being down 2 scores on 2 separate occasions in the game when you were down 14-0, and then again when you were down 28-14 at the beginning of the second half, or at the midpoint of the second half. He had the poise, but it was, I think the final touchdown drive was the best indication of that. That you were pinned back at the 2. You needed to drive 98 yards, down 3 points. You needed to find the end zone. A field goal, yeah, you could have tied it, but then Wisconsin would have gotten the ball back. They kick a field goal, the game's over. The LSU really needed to find the end zone and score there. Pin back at your own 2. And Garrett Nussmeier was able to make it happen. He had the big 37-yard pass to Kyron Lacey to get to midfield, and then the big 43-yard pass to Chris Hilton to get deep into Wisconsin territory, which then set up Josh Williams for a run to get to the 1-yard line, and then that short pass to Brian Thomas into the end zone. That's not easy to do. It's not easy to drive down the field 98 yards, but it was Garrett Nussmeier's arm and Garrett Nussmeier's poise in a position like that. I mean, how much time was on the clock? He had 6 minutes. We got plenty of time, but Wisconsin really, for the most part, was able to Wisconsin's defense wasn't making it easy for Garrett Nussmeier or the run game all day long. They weren't going to make it easy, especially in a had-to-have-it drive for LSU there. LSU had to have it. Garrett Nussmeier needed to make it happen, and he did. And that was incredibly impressive to me. Now, the defense had an absolutely horrendous day. But they got a couple of timely sacks at the end of the game to seal the victory for LSU. So I'm not going to give a lot of credit to the defense, and we'll get into the defense. We'll probably get into that in tomorrow's podcast. But I really liked what I saw from Garrett Nussmeier. And I thought going into that game, we as LSU fans are either going to have a whole lot more questions about this quarterback position going into 2024 after the bowl game, or we're going to feel better. And honestly, I feel better. And I think that you should too. Because how I felt this past year when Jayden Daniels was quarterbacking this team, it didn't matter how many touchdowns this defense gave up, and they gave up a lot of them. I always felt this sense of calmness of it's okay because Jayden Daniels is going to get the ball back. It's okay because they're going to be able to find the end zone. Now, I didn't feel like that in the entirety of the game against Wisconsin. Of course, there was nothing really that this LSU offense showed us early on to make me feel that sense of comfort. I felt like that sense of comfort started to settle in later in the game, where I started to feel this sense of, it's okay. We got this. They can find a way to win this football game. And Garrett Nussmeier found a way to win it. I don't know what spring practice is going to look like. I don't know what fall camp is going to look like. I don't know what AJ Swan looks like under the development of Joe Sloan and this offensive coaching staff. But where it stands right now, Garrett Nussmeier earned the opportunity to be the starting quarterback of this football team. He had a heck of a game against Wisconsin. Now, again, it wasn't all great. It wasn't all pretty, but I saw poise. I saw confidence. I saw the ability to make and extend plays. And I saw a guy that was not afraid at the challenge. And I like that. LSU gets 10 wins for the second year in a row. What does that mean? What does that mean for LSU? We'll get into that coming up next on Locked On LSU. All right, rolling along here, locked on LSU. LSU gets the win in the bowl game 35-31 over Wisconsin. Now starting 2024 on a very dramatic note, on a very stressful note, but a high note nonetheless, because LSU notched its 10th win of the 2023 season against Wisconsin. Now you got back-to-back 10-win seasons. 10 wins in 2022, 10 wins in 2023 in just 2 years under Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly talked about that. Whenever LSU lost to Alabama, and it was going to be clear that they weren't going back to the SEC championship game, that 10 wins in the regular season was not going to be feasible. Brian Kelly talked about how important the bowl game was, how important he viewed, and probably the locker room as well, how they viewed 10 win seasons. That's nothing to scoff at, and that is 110% correct. 10 win seasons aren't something that you can look at and say, meh, whatever. That matters. It means something. It means something in the context of developing and building a program. Let's not forget, we are only 2 years removed from LSU having 40 scholarship players and playing with a wide receiver at quarterback. Let's not forget the state in which this program was at in 2021, in January 2021, when Brian Kelly took over this, or 2022 rather, when Brian Kelly took over this football program. There was zero depth. It was left in ruins. You had a lot of great players. Don't get me wrong. It's not like Brian Kelly was inheriting nothing, but it's not like he was inheriting, a wealth of riches in terms of talent and depth. Now, 2 years later, you have a trip to the SEC championship game. You beat Alabama in year one, and you have a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback in 2 10-win seasons. That's incredibly impressive. And I want to look at that now through a vacuum and say credit to Brian Kelly. Credit to this coaching staff. Credit to this recruiting staff for rebuilding a team. For rebuilding a team and growing with that team, getting better year over year. I think it's very impressive what Brian Kelly has done. But looking ahead, Brian Kelly is going into year 3. Now, year 1, you get a lot of benefit of the doubt. Year 2, I think you get less benefit of the doubt. Excuse me. You get less benefit of the doubt, but you still have some benefit of the doubt of it. You're only in year 2 of, you didn't inherit a lot, so on and so forth. Roster turnover, transfer portal, so on and so forth. Year 3, you get no more benefit of the doubt. I don't think that you deserve any more benefit of the doubt. Brian Kelly even said it himself. I think that we're in a place that we can now ascend, that we've built the foundation. We've established who we are as a program, what we want to be. We've established depth. Now the next step is getting back to the SEC championship game, getting to the college football playoff, being a championship caliber team. In year 3, you get no more benefits of the doubt. In year 3, I don't think 10-win seasons are good enough anymore, if I'm going to be completely honest and frank with you. Now, it completely depends on how the season shakes out. Look, LSU doesn't have an easy schedule next year. If you win 10 wins, if you win 10 games on LSU with LSU's schedule next year, that's going to be impressive. But that's no longer, I think the luster starts to wear off there. That, 10-win seasons are great and all, but what are you doing with them? That, you had the number 1 offense in the country this past year, but you still lost 3 games. You need to start figuring those things out. That 10 wins, it's really impressive. And I think that Brian Kelly should be proud of himself. This program should be proud of itself. That we as LSU fans should be excited and encouraged of what that means. But keeping a reminder, keeping the back of our minds, that it's not just about winning 10 games, winning a bowl game at the end of the season against an 8-4 Big Ten team and moving into the next season saying, hey, woohoo, we won 10 games. No, it's going to get to a certain point where that's just not good enough anymore. Where that just 10 wins does not satiate the thirst or the hunger that this fan base has to get back to the biggest stages in college football. So I'm not going to poo-poo on a 10-win season. Not in the slightest. Do not get that twisted. I think it's a big accomplishment for this program, period, but especially given where it was just a couple of years ago. But Brian Kelly said it. We're ready to ascend. So show it to me. It's not just about 10 wins anymore. It's about championships. It's about trophies. It's about showing something on a national stage. That's the expectation at LSU. And in year 3, that's when that needs to start happening. I think Brian Kelly has done a fantastic job in his first 2 years. But all of that's a moot point now. Now it's about what you do in year 3. And your job gets significantly more difficult in 2024. Texas and Oklahoma join the SEC. When 2 of your 4 non-conference games come against USC and UCLA, 2 very good teams. When you still have a whole lot of work to do with your defense, I get it. I understand. It's not easy. But Brian Kelly didn't sign up for this job because it was going to be easy. Brian Kelly signed up for this job because every single week is a challenge. And it's going to get that much more challenging. And the expectations only raise even more. So while I think that we can be excited, celebrate, rejoice, enjoy how much fun this past season was, at least when the offense was on the field. It wasn't very fun when the defense was on the field. But as fun as the season was, and as great of an accomplishment as 10 wins are, what comes next? That's the question. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked on LSU your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up in tomorrow's edition of Locked on LSU, a massive commitment in the 2024 class. We'll break down all things recruiting with Locked On's official recruiting insider, Brian Smith. Also, I mentioned that we're going to talk about the defense. We got to do that. We put it off for too long, talking about Garrett Nussmeier, how much fun that final drive was. Now we got to get down to business, talk about what wasn't very fun. We'll get into the defense as well, coming up on the next few editions of Locked on LSU.